Welcome back to the Gutshot Podcast, where conversations that nobody wants to talk about is here. All right, I'm Shamsul. Sam, this is I'm back again with our partner here, Syed Akbar.
Good morning.
We, as promised, today we're going to talk about a new competitive policy that can replace or should replace the NEP. Gentlemen, ladies, those who have not subscribed, please do so that you get all the new episodes as it drops. And we grow this Gutshot community where thinking people come around. By the way, we like your comments. We take all the positives and the negatives and we read them all, yeah, by the way. So please keep on this conversation going. So, going straight to the topic that we want to discuss today, Malaysia's new economic policy was launched approximately, I believe, 1971 after the 69 racial riot. Basically, it's supposed to be the two main goals were eradicating poverty regardless of race and restructuring society to eliminate racial economic identification. Primarily boosting the economic standing of Malays and indigenous people, the so-called Bumi Putra, via affirmative action. Now, this has been a feature of our nation in one form or another. 1991, we had the National Development Policy, which is basically nothing has changed as far as this NEP is concerned. That's why we keep talking about NEP. So in approximately, I would say we are close to 50 plus years, 55 years maybe of this policy that has been ongoing. And one form or another, myself and Syed has been talking about this, and we have some agreement on things and some things that we want to thrash out today. Syed, let's start off and I mean, if you look at this, why do you think we need a change right now?
Well, 51 years, 55 years since 1971. Are we happy with what we have achieved so far? And more importantly, where will we be 10 years, 20 years, another 50 years from now? And then is there such a thing as an economic policy being written in stone and it can never be changed? I think that is not right. To have that kind of belief can be disastrous. So the new economic policy has been in place until today for 55 years now. It is high time that we changed it because it's been too long, and the results, well, there have been some successes, but the time has come where I think it has outlived its usefulness, and we have to think up another policy that will put us on a proper path and more in sync with the changes and the movements at fantastic speed that are happening all around us, not just in other countries around us, but also within our own society, but among different races. Because as you know, there are major imbalances between racial groups in the country, and one of the objectives of the new economic policy was to even out and narrow the differences so that, the identification by race, economic status by race will be overcome, and that we will be able to erase all those differences. We have not been able to do that. And now there is a danger that the economic imbalances on a racial basis are actually widening in the country again, like how things were before the new economic policy. So we are back to square one, meaning that the policy doesn't work as well anymore. So we have to change, and what you mentioned just now, a new competitive policy would be more in keeping with putting the country, the society, and our multiracial community on a better path to a better future. So I think we have to look into that.
On my side of this, on this issue, I want to give maybe I would say if there are any two things that actually, on top of my head, that have been a success with respect to the NEP, I would say the concerted effort at actually two things. One is providing education to the masses intensively from a, well, some people don't like to call it secular, right? I don't care. As far as I'm concerned, these are worldly and scientifically based education system to the masses, irrespective of race. Irrespective of race, which is what supposed to be the NEP was all about. And because it was that way, the Bumiputras, the Malays, benefited a lot out of it, especially in the early days, in the 70s and early 80s, right? I'm not so sure now anymore, because like everything else, I think that it goes, when you put a KPI based on race and quota, and not just race on quota, any KPI that you put in without having a balancing effect, the tendency of human being is actually to overshoot that and actually make it worse than what it was intended to be. Okay? So I think that has happened with education, and to the detriment of not just Malay society, but also society overall and the nation. The second thing that I do want to give credit for with respect, but it is also in industrialization, in what do you call a concerted effort at small holdings of farmers, mainly when Felda was started up, which is to open up land for people to come in and have their small holdings in palm oil plantation and whatnot. There was a huge ability to actually be self-sufficient. I think that also got into the hands of not just political masters, but the crony link economy that was built up from the NEP that actually destroyed the dreams of the plantation owners. So everything what we have seen today is a good thing in the initial that actually become a bane to society. The last point I want to make on this before I hand it back to you, Syed, on this conversation, is that I think that you need to. I am a believer that merit counts. At the end of the day, merit counts, and my own personal experience and my own looking at other people's experience, the Malays that had to go through meritocracy basically succeeds even better than going through a quota system. So I don't look at affirmative action per se. I look at what action it is. And for those people who say the NEP made us, got us into industrialization, I say that's wrong. It's not It's not the NEP that brought us into industrialization. It's actually the opening up of the economy that Mahathir initiated that brought the country from agrarian economy into industrial economy, and there was no race involved in terms of that particular episode. Right.
Well, if I may.
So, yeah, please.
If I may touch a little bit on what you said about Felda.
Right.
Felda began before the new economic policy. I think Felda started in the 60s. But nevertheless, yes, it is part of the new economic policy. And Felda was successful in the beginning. I remember when I was in school in the 70s, in secondary school, Felda settlers, Felda farmers, plantation owners, oil palm, no, mostly palm oil, they were making a good income. In those days, income in excess of 1,000 ringgit a month or up to 2,000 ringgit was considered quite good, high income in those days, in the 1970s, So Felda settlers were making in excess of over 1,000 ringgit per month, 1,500 ringgit and 1,000, which was very high in those days because the palm oil prices were good and all that. Felda provided employment and opportunities for a large number of people, mostly Malays, in the tens and hundreds of thousands. But 50 years or 60 years down the road, there is now a population of easily 3 million people on the Felda plantations throughout the country, mostly in the peninsula. Because, the settlers have grown up, they had children, now they're up to grandchildren level. But the sad thing is they're still living on those plots of land that they have. So now, after 3 generations, it is not sufficient anymore to sustain a comfortable standard of living for that many people. You have about 3 million people in the Felda settlements. It's a big population, and it used to be a vote bank for the political parties. But now, Felda is generally identified as B40. Because when you have that many people still dependent on, the original 10 acres of land, because each settler had 10 acres of land, that was 50, 60 years ago. Now his grandchildren have grown up and all living off the same 10 acres is insufficient. A lot of them have left the Felda settlements and moved to the urban areas to look for their livelihood. But now the Felda people, many of them are in the B40 group because 10 acres of oil palm plantation can only generate so much income. So the thing is, the people who were in charge of Felda and our policymakers have not thought up ways to move the Felda settlers to a higher level, to a different level. They are still in the same situation they were 60 years ago. You find a piece of land, you dig a hole in the ground, you plant the oil palm, and then you wait for it to fruit, and you harvest the fruit, and you sell it to the Felda oil palm mill. That's it. Nothing much has changed. So basically, the grandchildren of the settlers today are doing exactly the same value-added output as their grandfathers. So this is where it was good at that time, but now because the numbers of people have increased, it is not helping them as much anymore. They are poor. Felda settlers are poor people. I know because I've been there. I've been to a few Felda settlements. So this is a policy that did not evolve with time. We did not increase the output. We did not increase the modernization. We did not create new industries out of Felda for the people there, so that they would evolve into more value-added participants in the economy, especially the plantation economy. And don't forget, we have discussed this before. If you add up the plantation economy in Malaysia, it's only about 2% of the GDP. Millions of acres of land, but you only produce 2% of the GDP, plantation agriculture. Yep. So are we focusing too much effort, energy, and little return, and on something that generates so little return? Tourism generates much higher return, but how many people, for example, how many Felda settlers have we encouraged to embark to diversify into tourism, for example? Because Felda settlers have one thing: they have land, and land is a major resource, especially for like tourism related activities. What I'm trying to say is that we have not diversified them despite 60 years. We're telling them that that's it. It's you and your chankol and your tree. So my question is, when we started this conversation, what's going to happen to the Felda settlers 10 years, 20 years, 50 years down the road? Are they going to be in the same position? So this is what we need to rethink. The country has been stuck in a rut. The feet of especially the politicians and the leaders is stuck in concrete. They cannot move. So what was started 50 years ago, 60 years ago, Felda, for example, unchanging. New economic policy 55 years ago, unchanging.
Well, actually,
no change.
Syed, I think, if I were to add to that point, I don't think it is unchanging. It actually quite a number of the policies that come after which actually made it worse. It builds upon the worst part of the social engineering and actually made it worse. In the quota system, and that's why today we have practically more than 90% civil service being Malays, and we grow that civil service actually through statutory government-linked companies, and these actually made the situation even worse because we are shielding the majority of our population from being competitive and being entitled towards government a protection from the government. And the world has changed the last 30 years. And on top of that, Syed, I want to add one more thing from this point. Let's assume that our non-Malay population is at least 30%, if not up to more than 40%, right? And if they are discriminated against, let's put it clearly. Malaysia, actually, you go and look at objective surveys and objective data. We institutionalize racism in our laws, right? Whether we like it or not, guys, this is what Malaysia is known for outside of our borders. It is an institutionalized racism and by quota system. And this actually then discourage our non-Malay population from entering civil service, from entering the armed forces, from, bringing a significant portion of our talent into our governance. And then on top of that, when we talk about brain drain, look, the power of what do they need to do, our people, whether it's Malay or non-Malay, Bumiputra, non-Bumiputra, is their future prospects. And if they see that they can have a better future prospect outside the country, that is what they will do. And that is why we are getting a lot of people working in Singapore and even converting to Singapore. The problem is this, Syed, as a last point before I hand this back to you, is that for the bulk of this 30 to 40%, they have no hope of migration. They're going to be stuck here, okay? And they're going to be stuck with the policies of the majority that is going to bring down the economic potential of this nation. And that's my concern.
Okay, excuse me. Well, from what you just said, let's look at the government universities, the public universities. So far, all the heads, the vice chancellors, are Malays or Bumiputras. In Malaysia, you don't have. I don't think there are any non-Malays who are vice chancellors of any of the public universities, the government universities. So if you were a non-Malay, as you mentioned just now, and you're an academic, or you want to be an academic, or you have your master's degree and your PhD, and you want to contribute in the academic field, would you want to embark on a career in the public universities? When knowing that there are no
there's a ceiling.
There's a ceiling, lah.
Yeah.
There are no non-Malays as vice chancellors of any of the public universities, so you may be tempted to pursue other career options, lah. So in that sense, we do lose talent. Because we don't attract the everybody on a merit basis. So there's a cost. The point that I wanted to make is that there is a cost to all this. So when you have the new economic policy in its present present shape, which you mentioned, the quotas and the race-based quotas. That is a new economic policy. Basically, it's all these race-based quotas. There is a cost to it. There are two major costs to it. Two huge costs. The one, we lose talent. As you say, people leave the country. Not everybody leaves the country. The majority of Malaysians are here. If you look over the last since Merdeka, 1957, and you count the number of people who have migrated out of Malaysia, it's a tiny portion compared to our population. There's 34 million people here. Not everybody has left the country. All Malaysians are still here. Those who migrate, yes, but over time there's a small number.
The problem with the people who migrate are mostly the best talent.
Yes, but so we do lose talent. So that is a cost for the economy, and we lose consumers. If they didn't leave and they stayed here, imagine they will add to the economy. There'll be consumers. They'll be buying. They'll be producing. They would be people who create output, create new wealth. All those things. You see, we lost Grab. Grab is a Malaysian founder, is a Malaysian guy, and they went to Singapore, and now their corporate headquarters in Singapore, and I don't know how many billion US dollars is that company worth now. It's a huge company, and they pay corporate taxes in Singapore, whereas over here we got 3 million young people riding our motorbikes and delivering food and stuff for Grab. So there is a cost. There is a cost that we lose talent. We lose people who cannot participate as effectively in the country. But I'm referring to those 34 million who did stay behind. They have not migrated. Now they are also restricted by all the quotas and restrictions. They cannot fully visualize their potential, their capacity. So we could have had a Bill Gates, or we could have had who's a steel magnate, that Indian fellow, whoever. We could have an ArcelorMittal here in Malaysia, a steel magnate. But it didn't happen because the banking industry is an oligopoly. Few banks decide who gets credit, things like that. There are licensing requirements, there are quota requirements. So we did not produce our Bill Gates and our Elon Musk, or even the Alibaba guy, Jack Ma. We didn't produce all these guys in sufficient quantity. So the talent that did not come out because of all these policies. So that is a big cost. Now, the other thing is, you can only maintain this kind of a very expensive policy by using taxpayers' funds. This kind of policy, the new economic policy, cannot survive on market forces. No way. You need to have an endless, bottomless pit of taxpayers' funds to pay for all this, I would say, foolishness. This is a very luxurious, very expensive, foolish experiment. Before I forget, the new economic policy cannot be found in any textbook. There is no economic textbook which you can open and find something called the new economic policy. It was a political gimmick which came about, you mentioned earlier, after 1969. They almost lost their pants in 1969. The politicians panicked. They didn't know what to do. So somebody sat down and came up with a new economic policy. It's not in.
Think it was a coup?
It's not in any textbook. It's just a political gimmick that has stuck for the last 55 years. The 30% policy. Tun Dai made the famous statement. We don't know where the 30% came from. The 30% equity policy. It's a illogical, senseless, nonsensical number. Why 30%? You mentioned you are 50%, 60% of the population. Logic dictates that if you are 60% of the population, Malays, Bumiputras, you should ask for 60% of the equity of the public listed companies, the corporate wealth or whatever. If you are 50%, you ask for 50%. Why did you ask for 30%? It's ridiculous. The point I'm trying to make is this 30% is a nonsensical number.
You pick out from the air.
Tun Dai says we do not know where the 30% came from. It's a nonsensical number. So a nonsensical number, pure nonsense, a rubbish. May I repeat?
Rubbish.
A rubbish number, 30%, has become policy for decades. There is no textbook you can open and check, how do we derive this number? So we have been running on nonsensical policy for the last, I don't know how many decades. My question is, how many more decades? Yeah. So you see, there's a cost to all this. You can...
Say, can I interject and then you continue on the cost, right?
Please.
Okay? When you said that this can only be funded by taxpayers, we are also funding this nonsensical rubbish through our oil revenue, okay, which is the people's assets.
Public funds.
Public funds.
It's public funds.
Right?
Yeah.
And the oil revenue, it's going to go down every year. And we already see it today. And I am willing to bet my bottom dollar that actually the oil price is going to keep going down infinitely. Because the world is in a glut that has no end. And you also have got the renewable infrastructure being built up.
And thorium reactors.
Right?
In China.
Okay. So, we are looking at a cliff just next to our feet. All right? So, that's my interjection of why to me, and I think to you as well, why we are having this discussion is because we are staring at the pit below us just a few inches away. So,
as I was saying, there's a cost to all this, and you can only maintain this kind of a very luxurious, frivolous kind of a policy, economic policy, by drawing down on public funds.
Yep.
Because you have to pay for all this using public funds. Taxpayers' money, government revenue, petroleum revenue, whatever. Because without public funds, you cannot do this. This is to say that this kind of policy can stand on its own merit, can sustain itself in an open market. That's ridiculous, impossible. The only way you can maintain this is by having access to taxpayers' money and public funds, which is a diminishing commodity. It's a disappearing commodity. As you said, oil revenue is decreasing, and then tax collection is insufficient because population keeps increasing. When the new economic policy was crafted in 1971, what was our population? 9-10 million people? I remember it was around there. We were just maybe 9-10 million people or around that number. Now we are at 34 million people, see. So we have a larger number of people dependent on public funds to sustain their living or sustain their economic opportunities, all paid for using public money and taxpayer funds, which is not enough. So now, as a result of which, the last few years we are seeing that public debt has increased. Every year the government borrows more and more money from various sources. I think in this budget, the budget was 420 billion ringgit. The government revenue was about 340 over billion ringgit, whereby oil revenue, petroleum revenue was about 42 over billion ringgit. There's still a shortfall about 80 billion ringgit, so that's the amount they're going to borrow. So every year you're borrowing these billions and billions of ringgit because there's a shortfall. There's not enough tax collection, and oil revenue is going down. There's not enough tax collection because the economy doesn't grow as much, or as much as it should or as it could. We don't have those fantastic growth rates of 8% and 9% anymore. We are in the 4 or 5. This year people are saying a bit more optimistic, but we're not generating enough growth in our economy. Vietnam is doing 8% consistently. We need those kind of numbers. Then the government can collect sufficient revenue to fund all its activities without having to borrow as much money, because each time you borrow money, you're burdening our future government revenue, which will be used to pay the interest and pay back the loans, and there'll be less money left to develop the country. So they don't seem to understand that. But it's okay if you borrow money and you invest it in market-based, market-oriented, market-priced projects in the country which generate market returns. But if you use public funds, taxpayers' funds, and you want to buy a submarine for the Navy, right? So that you can buy the submarine direct from the manufacturer at X billion, right? But because of the new economic policy, there's a layer in between. There's Bumiputra companies in between, because we want to encourage Bumiputra participation in the defense industry, for example. So there's a middleman comes in, and the government buys the submarine from him And then the middleman is the one who buys the submarine from the supplier, right? So of course he's going to add a markup. And these markups are huge for doing nothing, because what is the value added? So let's say for argument's sake, let's be generous, not too generous. Let's say he makes a markup of 25%. Is
still 25% of the value of the submarine.
What does he add for the 25%? So let's say the submarine costs 4 billion ringgit, right? So he adds a markup of 25%. That's 1 billion ringgit. Then he sells it to the government for 5 billion ringgit. We pay an extra 1 billion ringgit because the policy says we need to develop Bumiputra defense contractors and defense suppliers.
That's not even a contractor. That's just rent seeking.
So, right, exactly. So what did he contribute for that extra 1 billion you've taken from us, the taxpayer? So these guys, the guys in the middle, whoever they are, the rich and the connected, they are the lucky people. They made 1 billion ringgit. But what did they add in return into the economy, into the defense of the country? Have they added anything? Was it extra 1 billion worth that they have added into the defense of the country or into the economy? No, the answer is none. It is just, in Malay we call it atas angin, just on empty air you make money. So, but what you have done is you have extracted 1 billion extra ringgit from the taxpayers' funds with no
value added,
no equivalent return. Yes, no value added to the country lah. So it's this costs us. We've been doing this now for 50 years. So in every sector there is this kind of setup, the rent seeking behavior. Let's talk about the concessions, various concessions which the government grants in every area, in telecommunications, our cellular systems, in the roads, in garbage collection, in sewerage, in cleaning of government buildings, vehicle inspections, whatever. There's always a franchise, that goes out 20 years. There is monopoly licenses, permits, whatever, which the government dishes out mostly to Bumiputra companies, which do the same thing. They come in between, they add a layer, they can charge a 25% or whatever profit with no real value added, and this is paid for using taxpayers' funds. So after 50 years of doing this kind of nonsense, this is nonsensical behavior, you end up with the public debt now. It's more than about 1 trillion ringgit or whatever. But most importantly, where is the equivalent amount of improvement in our lives, the people, after spending so much money over the last decades? So the people become poorer. This is, some people say, the middle income trap. No, this is purely without foresight, unthinking behavior by mostly political people who do not really care for what happens to the public, especially in terms of the efficacy, the correct use of taxpayers' money. Taxpayers' money is being burned. They are lighting their cigars with 50 ringgit bill. That's what has been happening. So we are basically impoverishing ourselves. Bottom line is, we are getting poorer.
Okay, Syed. I mean, we've gone through a preambles of where we think things are going wrong. We feel that this add not just a layer, but multiple layers of wastage of public resources and funds. And we are staring at a world that actually is getting more competitive. Not just getting more competitive, I think the whole world has changed and is changing to a point where if you add extra layer of costs for yourself, you are just going to price yourself out of the market economy globally, right? At the same time, your people then will have less opportunity, because I don't really care who is actually my bosses or my managers or whatever, their skin color, because at the end of the day, they still have to hire enough people to run their company. Okay? And the numbers will make it up by themselves as long as you build a meritocratic system. a meritocratic society, be it whatever race it is. So I think we need to relook at it. Since politicians doesn't want to talk about how they're going to replace it, let's talk about how we're going to replace it and maybe inject into public discussion. This is what needed, and let that sink in and grow into the public consciousness. Syed, where would you start?
The step one for me, step one is we simply have to promote more competitive behavior at all levels. There simply has to be more competition in the economy. I have said this many times. We do not have complete market forces operating in our economy. Our economy is so overregulated, controlled, and all kinds of strictures and strangleholds in our imposed on the economy by government policy, by unthinking government policy. We have to get rid of all this. This affirmative action for Bumiputras, I've said before, we need it. We cannot get rid of the affirmative action overnight. But there are things which we can do. For example, you can have a graduation system where, let's say you help the Bumiputras to come up in life with education opportunities and things like that. And then even in business and all that. But there must be graduation where after a certain point, they graduate, they don't need assistance anymore. But you cannot keep assisting the Bumiputra from the cradle to the grave, non-stop, because that is very expensive, number one. Number two is, it prevents the Bumiputra from competing on his own. Therefore, he does not become his output is not maximized, meaning that he is unable or he's not motivated to generate new wealth on his own. Instead, he goes back to government. Goes back to government means taxpayers' funds. He is not generating new wealth. He is merely processing and regurgitating taxpayers' funds. That's it. So when you do that, because your taxpayers' funds are limited, it's from tax collection every year. So you're you're giving pocket money to your children to go to school. You give them pocket money, and then you take a bit of their pocket money and say, "Daddy is going to invest this for our future, of our family." It is a diminishing return, because it is your own money. You gave your kids and you're depriving them, and it doesn't work out. So what we need to do is that the Bumiputras at certain point in time, equip them with competitive skills where they graduate and stand on their own feet. So we have to do this throughout the economy. And then you have these things like, this large scale over-dependence on government handouts, otherwise known as cronyism and the elite groups. We have to put an end to the cronyism, the political cronyism, and the existence of rich elite groups who seem to always get the plum in the pudding. They always pick the best plum in the pudding. They always get the big projects, and what happens is that they corner a sizable chunk of the taxpayers' funds, the public funds, which government uses to in this kind of policy, which denies the public and the rest of the country access to the same amount of benefits. So somebody loses just because a few can gain. This is a big problem.
May I go back to affirmative action? Hold a thought on the cronyism. I want to go back to that. But I want to address my thoughts on affirmative action. I think I've said this before. I don't believe in so-called what has been called affirmative action. The reason is the minute you say, I'm going to help you specifically because of your race, religion, skin color, tribes, clan, you already actually are on the wrong track. All right? When you say graduation, when are you going to graduate? What does it mean, graduation? If you ask me, the initial stage of a human being's development is at the before they go to school. So you've got the parents, then you've got preschool, which are preparing you to think, right? And then you go primary and you go secondary. I finish there because I believe once you got to 17 or 18 years old, your mindset has already become almost concrete, right? So if you go to the concept that everybody deserves a good education, fundamentally strong education, you should be able, by the time the guy is 17, the young people is 17 or 18, they are done. You know, they either are able to compete or they are not able to compete. There's no graduation beyond that. After that, it's about, do you go straight to work? Do you go for apprenticeship? Do you go for technical education or courses to be skillful at something? Or do you go for higher education, right? To be an engineer, to be a scientist, to be a lawyer, whatever, right? Not everybody should or deserve to go to university. The problem with the way we have been thinking is that everybody, and especially the Malays, for some reason or another, must be put into university. So I don't see the help is needed beyond, for anybody, any race, beyond 17 or 18 years old. So if you've got to create a learning environment at that age, and then I don't see a quota system anymore. Because why? If you're 18 years old and you cannot go to university at a certain standard that is competitive globally, you don't deserve. You shouldn't be. Because all you're going to do is put that person into the wrong job, later on. So this is my problem with actually affirmative action, so to speak, in education.
May I?
Yeah, please.
When you say that the cutoff age should be about 17, 18 years old.
In terms of education per se.
Okay, yeah, that is, that is one way of picking a graduation. That means above a certain age, you don't need assistance anymore. All those, we can factor that in, you see.
I don't mean you don't need assistance anymore. What I'm saying is that the formative elements, your fundamentals,
right,
has been set. Your interest has been almost set, right? Whatever changes happen in general population is almost set. There will be anomalies, okay? Yeah. There will be outliers, but we don't do policies for outliers.
You're right. The thing is, all this, as I keep saying this morning, all these things that we do, this assistance, affirmative action, I mean, I agree with it. I don't disagree with it. But somebody has to pay for it. So who pays for all these affirmative action policies? It has to come from taxpayers' contribution. So in other words, the people who are not beneficiaries of affirmative action policies, basically the non-Malays, they have to generate the income and the tax contribution to the government to help pay for the affirmative action of the Malays. So it is simple common sense that while you assist the Malays, the Bumiputras, through affirmative action programs, you should not put up obstacles or put up barriers for the non-Malays in pursuing whatever they want to pursue in terms of education and economic opportunities, because you depend on their tax contribution to pay for the affirmative action policies. But the way the politicians, may I repeat, the politicians, they have screwed up the new economic policies that not only are they continuing the affirmative action policies, and there also a lot of abuses of the policy. For example, the elitism and the cronyism is one such abuse, putting in the rent-seeking behavior with no value added. These are all the negatives of the affirmative action policy. Then again, for political reasons, they obstruct the others, the non-Malays, from their fair share. In pursuing opportunities in education, in business, in whatever, in business, anything. There is quotas, licensing, restrictions. You restrict them from maximizing their potential, and at the same time, you depend on collecting taxes from these people, the non-Malays, to fund the affirmative action for the Malays. You are poking yourself in the eye, in both eyes, and they don't seem to understand this. That's why now, over the last 50 years, we find that the government is collecting insufficient taxes. Every year there's a shortfall, as I just mentioned. For this year's budget, the shortfall is about 80 billion ringgit. In a 420 billion ringgit budget, government revenue is only 340 billion. So they're short of about 80 billion ringgit, which they have to borrow. If you have allowed market forces to operate freely in this country, especially for the non-Malays, they would have generated that extra growth in the economy, which could have generated that shortfall, that 80 billion, which we cannot collect, maybe even more. So because the politicians now who are in charge of the new economic policy, they restrict the non-Malays from maximizing their economic potential. Therefore, the government's tax revenue is also dropping. It's insufficient. They don't seem to understand this. So this is the big cost, On the one side, you have all this freebie system, which we do not dispute. It can be better managed, but nobody disputes affirmative action. We need it. But it has to be funded by that portion of the economy which is outside the affirmative action. So if you do not encourage that portion of the economy, which generates taxpayer revenue for the government, at the end of the day, even your affirmative action programs are going to suffer because you will not have enough funds. So the politicians, I think they do not seem to understand this very well. They think that restricting other people, non-Bhumi Putras and non-Bhumis, through quotas and licensing and permits and things like that is a good thing. It is not. It is actually a very bad thing.
I think, I mean, it's the. I think you and I, maybe we disagree on the definition of affirmative. I look at it like what you're saying is that this additional cost, additional layer that we are wasting money on, right, which is unproductive. Had we channeled this to, the biggest contributor to productivity in the country, which is education. You ask me, it's education, right? We could have every child in our nation have access to technical in quote, scientifically based education, right? With all the required facilities for them to be critical thinking and upwardly mobile individuals, right? Irrespective of race and religion. That's where I'm coming from. And then when they're done with their secondary education, we don't worry about whether Malays are going to go to college, whether there are enough Malays in college. The thing is, I keep hearing also there is something very weird in our society when they set up public colleges to ensure that Malays are in college, and we've set up so many public colleges and universities, which I think the number does not justify the amount of teaching faculty that is capable to run a proper standard of education institution. So if we just let market forces determine how many colleges should be there, I think that will work, if you ask me, right? And then those that cannot go in, then they'll end up in vocational employment.
There is a good example when we liberalized the private universities.
Yeah.
We started that about late 1990s, early 2000. We liberalized private university education, and Malaysia has since become a private university education hub, actually. And we have many numerous private universities. Many of them are doing quite well. Tens of thousands of foreign students studying in Malaysia, as well as Malaysians, and a huge workforce in the private academic. In private universities, a huge private academic workforce outside the government academic system. So yes, it has contributed a lot, and of course, it has added tremendously to the educational output of the country. I'm talking about the private universities and colleges. So yes, that is determined purely by market. So that's a very good example. It's a very good example of when you free up the market forces in private university education, that industry has taken off to the skies. We have so many foreign universities now who have started their campuses in Malaysia. So that is a success story. So this is a clear-cut example. When you allow the market to decide, you liberalize the sector, tremendous growth has taken place, tremendous employment opportunities and output. So many thousands of foreign students and local students, they are here, they pay fees, they pay rental for room and board and lodging, they have to buy motorbikes and cars to get to school, and all this adds to economic activity in the country. So just by liberalizing one sector, which was very heavily controlled last time under the new economic policy, we didn't almost absolutely did not allow any private universities.
Yeah. The Constitution of Malaysia designates special privileges to the indigenous group, Malays and other indigenous groups. It does not specify a number. It really does not specify any number whatsoever. Going back to what you were saying, where does the 30% come from? It's a
out of thin air.
Out of thin air. So if you really think about that, right? I think we have an opportunity to start cranking back this number, right? And don't crank up this number from just procedure. I would crank back the number slowly. If we have it at 30, bring it down by 10%. And within a decade or less, I would like to see an economic policy that actually emphasizes GDP growth at every sector and new sectors, right? That is powered by the private sector. The private sector cannot include government-linked companies, cannot include state-owned economics, state-owned entities. It has to be pure private sector driven. And with that, you do like that. You see also, if you have 90% Malay-dominated occupation, like the civil service, we should crank it down to 50%. You know why? Because we need to have a diversity of thought.
Okay, if I may just add to that, why did they come up with the 30% policy? Okay, the number is debatable, 30% or whatever is debatable, but why this need for this number,
right?
30%, 50%, whatever? Because there is no proper yardstick. How are you going to measure? Okay, we've set up this thing called New Economic Policy from 1971. How are we going to measure the output? The outcome, because in any scientific method, if you cannot measure the output or the outcome, your method basically is wasting time. You must be able to measure the outcome. So for the new economic policy, they didn't know how to measure the outcome. So they said, okay, let's do the 30% thing. So 30% corporate wealth, which was a mistake. If I may suggest, there are other measures or yardsticks which are more more reliable and which are very robust. One of them, there's only two that I can think of. One is the EPF savings, and the other one is the income tax. Now, EPF, from the statistics available, Malays, their median savings in the EPF is below 10,000 ringgit. It's about 9,700 ringgit. The Chinese are over 45,000 ringgit, and the Indians are about 16,000 plus ringgit. So this is the racial disparity. You can see that the Malays are below 10,000, Chinese are over 45,000. That's about 4.5 times. If I may suggest, if you want to measure and gauge anything, we should make attempts that over time, the EPF contributions between the races, it becomes more, we equalize it, it becomes closer to each other. Meaning that for the Malays, you must make sure that more Malays are employed. Meaning that they have the capacity to be employed. They are employable. More Malays work in 9-to-5 jobs, and more Malays work in jobs that pay fixed incomes every month. Then you will close the gap between the Malay median EPF savings, which is now less than 10,000 ringgit, and you approach the Indians and the Chinese. So that is something that which you can measure very accurately, because these figures are available to the EPF. What does it mean? So if a Malay ends up having the same amount of median savings as the Chinese, for example, over a certain amount of time, it means that they are the same level of productivity. So regardless of which industry, which 30% or 50%, regardless, they are at the same level of productivity and output as the Chinese and the Indians and so on. So this way, you erase this racial imbalance, identifiable by race. Economic stature identifiable by race will disappear if we focus on making sure that the Malays' contribution to the EPF in their savings, it increases. The other one is income tax contribution. If the Chinese median savings in the EPF is 45,000 ringgit, which is more than 4 times a Malay, we can safely assume that the Chinese are also contributing 4 times more of the income tax payment. I mean, just simple rule of thumb. Rule of thumb.
Yeah.
So make sure that the Malay contribution to income tax also increases to match that of the Chinese. So once you do that, to me, regardless whether you own the Felda, your majority of the Felda plantations, or you have 30% of the banking sector, or you only have so many percent, regardless, if the average Malay can contribute same amount of income tax payment as the other races, same amount of median savings in the EPF, we have done our job. We have closed the gap between the races. But if you go like, we want to have the GLCs as a method of bringing up the Malay economy, therefore we have to control the banking system. This is some real thinking and real talk by people before. We have to control the banking system.
Oh, the same was talked about with respect to university entrance.
This is the flawed thinking, because you feel that by doing this oligopoly GLCs in this sector and that sector, therefore you can close the gap between the different races in the country. This is wrong. You don't do that. You focus and make sure that the guy can get up in the morning, he can go to work, he has the same capacity to produce wealth output as the next fella. Then you equalize the differences. You overcome the differences.
Say.
But if you say, if I may, if you say that, no, we have to control all the plantation land in the country, it is our identity, this and that, and the politicians, okay, then you get 2% of the GDP. But you create 98% of the tension in the country,
Oh, okay.
So if the priorities are misplaced.
I'm gonna see whether I can change your mind on a certain thing. Okay? Let's play this game. All right? I think they are basically two aspects of what you just said. One is actually outcome. All right? That's the KPIs that you were talking about, right? Whether it's EPF or a contribution or it's income tax contribution. To me, those are outcomes. Okay? Then you're talking about the methodology to get that outcome, which is them using, let's say, GLCs or them using land,
Which doesn't
or
work.
even which
It doesn't work.
also doesn't work,
Doesn't work.
because of actually manipulating free market, right? It is absolute
Denying access to the rest of the market, to the rest of the economy.
not just denying access to the rest of the market, but also to even the Malays themselves, okay, which is denying them a way that if they can go and get a free market access, they would be better off, okay?
In the long run, yes.
Yeah. So here's my thesis on this, right? I think on the first part is basically also what we've been doing wrong, which is determining the outcome instead of actually making sure that things are right in order to get an outcome, whatever it may be. Okay? So my argument is there is no way on earth anyone can determine an outcome by using that outcome as being, this is what I want to have, this is what I must achieve. If I don't achieve this, then I have to twerk around there, or, this is what I want to get. I got a problem with that. The reason is this, okay? Whilst it is good to actually say, okay, this is my target, right? This is my target. But then I got to do things that are right, okay? The problem with setting that target is mostly what human being will do is manipulate the process in order to achieve the target. No matter how they manipulate the process, even if the process is wrong, as long as they get that target, It's like, imagine this. It's like I want to win the football game 5-0. How can you do that?
You can pay the goalkeeper.
Exactly. You will have to pay the goalkeeper. You have to manipulate the referee. All right? Okay?
I like to...
Well, I mean, this is where I'm coming from.
Yeah, I like
what
to...
is, to me, that is having an outcome. Okay? I'm more into my philosophy is providing opportunities. And then whatever outcome happens, so be it.
So be it. If I may just close my point on the cost to the economy, the cost to the society. Everything, when you have all this affirmative action, it runs on public funds, taxpayers collection. Now, there's also in our country, in Malaysia, the new economic policy has also added extra cost on the ordinary citizen. And ordinary citizen means everybody, Malays, Bumiputras, non-Malays, everybody. This and the extra cost which we have been burdened with is because of the rent-seeking system which we described earlier when we spoke about that submarine example, which is just an example. This is the cost is borne by the public. When the public cannot run away from these government-imposed monopolies, oligopolies, these exclusive franchises, and protected concessions, which basically distort the market. So you have in our country, you have concessions for highways, for telephone communications, for so many things, which I mentioned earlier, including rubbish collection. These are mostly in the banking sector, which they are monopolies and oligopolies. So when they are monopolies and they are oligopolies, they set their own prices, and the cost is borne by the public. So the public is impoverished because we are definitely paying higher. There is no monopoly in the world which is user friendly. Or which is altruistic, they are generous and they have the welfare of the public in their heart. No way. That's not how monopolies work. Monopolies are there to
maximize profit,
maximize and gouge everything out of you that they can. And same with oligopolies. Our country has got too many monopolies and oligopolies and franchises and concessions which distort the markets, which are awarded by the government, by the politicians, and they keep it going year after year, decade after decade, no matter which government is in power. We have franchises and monopolies and oligopolies in this country that have been in power since I don't know how many tens of years ago, how many prime ministers ago. They are still around. So all this has a cost. Who pays for this? The public pays for this. What does it mean the public pays for this? We pay a ringgit, we do not get a ringgit in return. So at the end of the day, after decades, we become poorer.
We probably get about 30 to 40% to the ringgit.
So we get poorer. And here too, the racial imbalances play a part because different communities, because of their position in the society, they have learned to either not cope as well with the realities of the country, of the economy, or they can compete and they can perform better compared to the other races. I'm talking about the Malay, Chinese, Indian, the Boeing Futras, things like that. So when they are impacted by this kind of unfair situation in the country, monopolies, government-granted monopolies, oligopolies, government distortion of the market, different communities react differently. Those who are more well-equipped to succeed, in such an adverse environment, they may survive. They may even do well. Those who are less equipped, they fall behind even more. So you see the 3 million people in the gig economy riding around on motorbikes, delivering food parcels and all that. And these are basically unemployed people. That number is increasing. And as you said, previous podcast, 97% of the e-hailing drivers,
98,
they are Malays, you see. So the Chinese are not there, meaning that out of the 3 million or whatever, only a fraction are Chinese people. They have learned to live with adversity. They are overcoming things because of different skill sets that they have. But what I'm trying to say is that there is a cost to the entire society when the government has policies that seem to give a lot of leeway to the cronyism, the elite capitalists, the powerful, the connected, because in such a system, it's not a win-win game. It's if I win, you lose kind of a game. You see, so because it is all funded by taxpayers' money, which is limited. There are only so many eggs in the basket. So if one guy grabs 7, then there's only 3 more eggs left if there were 10 to begin with. The same principle applies. Taxpayers' money is limited. If this monopolies and oligopolies and franchise operators and all these elitist groups, they grab the large chunk of the pie or the cake, then what is left over to be shared by the remaining 34 million is down to is just peanuts. So we impoverish the public.
Those are basically the result of the KPI of quota that we impose upon our society. So in order for them to actually achieve that, or seem to want to achieve that, they manipulate the processes, they manipulate the system, and they benefit from it. Okay, not the society that benefits from it. Okay, and that's why we never get the real benefit for the nation or for the people. So I go back to the basic philosophy of what I believe a new comparative economic policy ought to look like. For me, if you ask me, I won't put a number on any KPI.
No 30%.
No 30%, nothing. Right? Okay? You can do that if you want to be practical about it. say gradually you bring it down. All right? But that's from a policy standpoint so that you can make it politically palatable, so to speak. However, the basic philosophy should be equal opportunity irrespective of race, religion, skin color, tribe, clan, everything. You must set up a law that says you cannot discriminate on this basis. That, I think, is the most important thing, which is you set up an economic law that says you cannot discriminate for purposes of employment, for purposes of going to university, for purposes of even promotion on the basis of race, religion, skin color, clan, tribe, whatever. I don't care. But what I want to see is an economic policy that says the country need to be powered by private sector GDP growth, right? So you bring up the pie, the economic pie, and then you force everybody to actually be fair. So that if I'm a Malay, I have to look at his merit instead of I worry whether actually am I employing a Chinese, Indian or an Iban or a Kadazan or whatever, right? If I'm a Chinese, I have to look at the merit. And if somebody can prove that that they are being discriminated, sue them in court. Okay? That is the only way we can change our economic makeup. All right? And ensuring the other processes happen. The minute you do like that, right? A lot of things will fall apart. Monopolies will fall apart. Okay? Insisting that you become Sharia compliant will fall apart. Okay? Those are things that cost our economy, you know. A lot of money in the billions.
It costs money.
Yeah.
It adds to doing a cost of doing business.
Correct. So
with no appropriate return.
Right. So I think if you were to put me in charge, I would just say, I want a law that says equal opportunity for everyone. I make sure everybody get the secular education. Now, if you want to go to Tafi school and you don't have the secular education for you to get employed, that's you punya pasal. Okay? Don't blame other people if you cannot get employment.
Don't use taxpayers' funds.
Don't use taxpayers' fund. And you know, in our constitution, basically it says that no one is compelled to pay for their tax ringgit, okay, to be used for another religion that is not his. So we as Muslim must ask, are we doing that? Because that is a question of ibadat and amanah. All right? That is about our trustworthiness and integrity. Right? So, going back to having a competitive economic policy, I believe that equality of opportunity set in law, irrespective of race, religion, clan. So if you are Fuchao or if you are Hokkien and you start giving scholarship based on Hokkien or Fuchao, I want that banned. There you go. All right? So if you issue out scholarship on basis of race, I want that banned. That is the only way we can stop all this corruption and all the system that, you know, that promote this waste of taxpayer funds. Syed, can you please roll this conversation into this one? That's my point of view.
Bottom line, when we do things wrong, when we make mistakes, there is a cost. And this is public policy making, economic policy, public policy making. There is a cost. And the cost is money. And that money has to come from somewhere. So it's public funds from our taxpayers' contribution. Our taxpayers' money does not generate the right return. There's no bang for the buck because it's being wasted in these policies which do not give the appropriate return into the society, into the economy. So number one. Number two is the same policies impoverish the public. It makes people poorer by two methods. By taking money out of their pocket unfairly. When you pay 2 times the price of the world market prices for a Toyota or for another Japanese car, you are being cheated. You're being cheated because of the structure of the duties and imports and whatever we have in the import of automobiles in the country. We have to pay double the price. It is impoverishing us with no adequate return for what the money that we spend. When we pay for the toll concessions endlessly for decades without stop, that is actually impoverishing us. So the taxpayers' money that we contribute is not utilized to the maximum, and our own pocket money is being taken away by all these other restrictions in the economy. We're getting hit from both sides, So when you do policy making that is quite silly and nonsensical, there is a cost. Somebody has to pay for it, and the people who pay for it are taxpayers' money and our own spending money, our own pocket money. So the public becomes poorer. The government also ends up in more debt, and for the benefit of a few. Right?
Yeah.
If you belong to the few, the elite, and those the wealthy class, then you benefit a lot from the system at the cost of the vast majority of the public. Now, you keep doing this every year and for decades, non-stop, the country is going to go down the wrong path. And because we are a multiracial society made up of different races, where every race seems to occupying a different rung on the economic ladder, so some will suffer more than the others. And you keep doing this over decades, those who suffer more will become worse and worse. And one day things will completely break down for them. So that'll be very bad for us. And if we keep going down this path, we are headed in the wrong direction. With that, I close my remarks.
Okay.
Thank you.
I mean, I just want to add one thing first. One thing, I am a believer in growing the GDP, all and by the private sector. Rising tides lifts all boats. The architect of China's rise in terms of economic superpower, Deng Xiaoping, had one saying, okay, I don't care what color the mouse is. It can be black, it can be white, it still catches the mice. With all that, guys, thank you. See you all again on the next episode of Gutshot.
Thank you.